Hey, I'm 3xBlast, and what you're looking at right now is the music video I made together with SuperFetch for one of our latest tracks, Summer Break. And the entire thing is being rendered in the Unity game engine. And in this video I'll go through the project file of this video and share some info and tips on how you can make your own music videos in Unity. I'll explain some of the more basic features of Unity as well, so if you're a bit more familiar with the engine, then feel free to skip around. I've added time codes so you can go to the parts that you need. I won't go over everything in absolute detail, but I will go over some of the more essential parts that you'll need to know in Unity. And I'll go through some of the issues that I had and the solutions I made for them. Now, as a little disclaimer, I'm not a designer or a 3D modeler or lighting expert. So if you see anything or hear anything that makes you think, hey, that could be done better, just let me know in the comments, because I'm sure I'll continue working with Unity for music videos in the future. And before we go into the project file itself, I just wanted to share a couple of things that we did outside of Unity to make this happen. So the first thing we did was agree on what angles we would shoot. And for that I used Clip Studio Paint, which has a 3D feature where you can set up models, so it's easier to kind of visualize the shots that you want. I then exported those and sent them to SuperFetch, and he then recorded himself in front of a green screen so that I could later import that video into Unity and place it in the 3D environment. Well, to record the footage, I used just my phone on a tripod with a green screen frame and one of those soft photography lights that you can just buy pretty much anywhere online. The total cost for the stuff that I didn't already have was about £120. And you can go bigger with everything, of course, but I found that this was good enough material to get quality footage that I could green screen out pretty easily. To key out the green screen, I use Sony Vegas, and there's a bunch of tutorials online on how you can key out green screens, but I found the one thing that I had some trouble with was making sure I didn't have any shadows on the green screen itself, and that I wasn't wearing anything that was too close to green. For the first shots I wore blue jeans, and apparently blue is a bit too close to green, so it was a bit difficult to key out, so just re-recorded it with black pants, and that made it way easier. Now, Sony Vegas, the editing I did besides this was syncing everything up. So making sure that the videos all start at the exact same time relative to the song. Also having videos exported in a 1:1 aspect ratio makes it way easier to project them on 3D planes later in Unity. Another thing that's very important to know is that you need to have the FPS of all the videos the same, because the way rendering in Unity works in combination with exporting the video and setting it up, you have to match the FPS of all the video elements in your recording with the FPS of Unity. That's something you can control yourself. You can set it to any value you want. And I just stuck with 24 FPS because that's basic video stuff. But if you want to have your frame rate higher or lower, you just need to make sure that you export all your video elements to the same FPS, or else you'll get weird glitches and videos will run faster or slower if it's not all matched up. The final bit on the videos before we open the Unity project is that Unity only takes the alpha channel from videos that are in WebM format. So if your editing software doesn't support WebM, you just need to find a converter somewhere to make that happen. It's a bit of a hassle, but that's just how Unity works. So this is the Unity scene that I've set up for the video. I've disabled the post-processing volumes for now, just to make it run a bit quicker. Before I'll show you how I imported everything and set everything up, I'll just go over a couple of the packages that I used in this video. And to check your packages, go to Window Package Manager, and let's just check what's in the project. So I use Cinemachine for some of the camera stuff, the high definition render pipeline to get the visuals right, all the materials and whatever works best with the high definition render pipeline. Text Mesh Pro, that's just for one element in the video, but if you have text in your video anywhere, the Text Mesh Pro is very useful to import. I then also had to download Unity Recorder to get the video exported from Unity to a separate file. You can skip it if you just want to record the game window with OBS or whatever, but the Unity Recorder makes it way easier. It spits out an MP4 file for you ready to use. And if you're downloading this, you might not see these packages show up. For that, you just need to go to the Unity registry and you can search here. And the final thing is when you import the high definition render pipeline, you might have some weird issues where everything is pink or maybe something else is wrong. And to fix that, you go to Window, Render Pipeline, HD Render Pipeline Wizard. And as you can see here, it's all good on my side. But if it's not, then I think somewhere around here, somewhere in this window, there's a fix everything button, and it just sets it up correctly for you. Now, first off, the biggest thing that makes this scene is obviously the 3D models. And as I said before, I'm not a 3D modeler. And if I would have needed to learn how to 3D model before making this video, it would just take weeks, months even maybe, for me to get to the level of quality that these models are. All of these models I got from TurboSquid or the Asset Store, and I think all besides one or two were free. I think that's an amazing resource to make use of, to make your own projects and not have to worry about learning how to model beforehand. Now, setting up these models can be a bit of a puzzle if you've never done it before, so let me just quickly show what happens when you drag in a model. At first, this one's way too big. So with W, E, and R, you can move, rotate, and scale. So let me just scale this down and rotate it and move it around a bit. As you can see, it's a gray blob right now because no texture is applied. And if you look here, this one is set up correctly. So how you do that is by going into the textures and then creating a new material. And the one I found that was the best fit for this style and these textures was the HDRP masked one. Just lock this here. And from there you just drag in all the provided maps. Roughness. And that's it. Let me just mark these as use these maps. And then you drag it on there and it's textured. Ready to use. Now, let me just quickly delete this. Don't need it anymore. For this one, obviously there's not a online model with the specific cover album that we're using. So for that I had to do some editing, and luckily that's very easy if you just go into the textures. You can see the material I have set up. That's the wrong one. This one. This is material that the CD case is using. And if I go into the color map, I can just open that or edit that. With pretty much any editing software, image editing software, you can edit these. And I'll just show how it also updates very quickly. Let me just edit this map, save it. Yeah, I want to save that. And then when you go back into Unity, it just updates. So you can quickly check out how things look if you just change the textures real quick. But just go back there. There. Now it's fine again. Now the next thing is lighting, and lighting is something that can change the look of a scene by a whole lot. So you'll probably spend a good amount of time setting those up. And again, I'm not an expert, but what I found is these three lights together work out great. So let me just disable all of them. and turn them on one by one. The first thing I added was a directional light, and the directional light is just a basic light that shines in from one specific direction and just illuminates everything. And a couple of the features or a couple of the sliders that you want to take a look at is the temperature, which changes the feel of the lighting from either hot to cold or somewhere realistic in between. I had it a bit warmer. Intensity, changes intensity of course. Now, doesn't look like it's changing a whole lot, but in combination with the other lights, it makes more of a difference. I then added a spotlight for some extra flare, some extra color in there on some certain spots, and then an area light to fill up some of the darker spots. And now if I move this around, you can see it's changing the feel of the scene a whole lot. I kind of wanted to have that summer sunsetting, bright sun feel in here, so I chose these settings. But again, if you're doing this, you'll probably want a different feel. So just move these things around a bit, see how it changes, see if you like it. And the one thing that all these things have in common is that the mode is set to mixed, which means that it both enables me to bake a light map, but it will also cast shadows dynamically on things that aren't marked as static. Like the video we'll add later in the video, that's moving around, and I wanted to have shadows realistically moving in the scene. So this is what you need to set the mode to mixed for. Now, because this is a 3D engine, you can kind of cheat with some stuff in here. Like for instance, as you can see, there's both these weird cubes, stretch out cubes floating around, and there's a big door. So realistically, this scene wouldn't be possible because it would all be blocked. So what I did here was, as you can see here, cast shadows is set to off. By default it's on, and then you get whatever this is. I don't want that. That's gross. So I set it to off, so all the light would come in if I didn't have these here. So I just added a couple of default Unity 3D cubes. That's just a 3D object cube, and then stretch them out. As you can see here, stretch them out along the x-axis, rotated them a bit, and put them in a place where it made the shadows look like I wanted them. Like there was a bigger, like there were bigger holes in front where the light actually came in through. So just don't be afraid to just mess around with stuff and kind of break the rules in terms of how it would realistically work. Because you're in a game engine, there's a lot of things you can mess around with. Now finally, to render the actual light map, you want to set all the models that aren't moving to static. These all should be. They're all set to static. And then to render the light map, you go to Window, Rendering, Lighting, and here is Generate Light Map. Now this will take a while, depending on how much stuff you have going on, how many lights you have in the scene, how good your computer is. So you kind of just want to set it up as best as you can, and then generate the light map. Now, just keep auto generate off, or else it will generate a new thing every time you change a little thing in the scene. And this is going to take a whole lot of time. Next is the cameras, and this is again something that will take a while to get right. But it's one of the important things to get right. So how this works with Cinemachine is you need to have one main camera in your scene, one actual camera. And there you have the Cinemachine brain component too, which you can do. Any component you add, you go to add component, and then You type in whatever you need to add to that. And from there, I also added a post-process layer to it, which again, add component post-process layer, which just enabled me to add some specific effects to certain cameras. Like one of the cameras has a depth of field filter to it that the others don't use. So by adding the post-process layer, that'll enable me to do that with Cinemachine. And finally, the default blend I set to cut instead of, I think the standard is ease in out. Cut means whenever a new camera gets activated, it'll hard cut to that camera. And ease in out is whenever a new camera gets activated, the digital camera will move to that new position. Now with us using real life footage, we couldn't have the camera panning around that real life footage because it would just look very weird. I'll show you in a bit how it looks when you pan around the video elements in the scene. But before that, I'll just show you how to set up different cameras. So what you want to do is create an empty game object, and on that empty game object you want to add a Cinemachine virtual camera. And then whenever you activate that, as you can see, it jumps to that new camera angle. So then it goes back, left angle, activate that, it'll go to that one. You get the idea. So what I did first is just set these cameras up generally in the location where we agreed the shots will be shot from. Like here, you can just move this empty game object around, and as you can see, the camera moves around with it. Just did that for every single shot. There's not much I changed about the cameras, but the one thing I did change was the focal length, which is just, need to activate it, which is basically the field of view. So I had that set to 11. Again, if in your video you maybe need to change it to something else. And then I added noise to every camera, and noise not in the terms of film grain, but this is movement noise. So what this one does, the handheld one, is it just moves the camera around a bit like it's being held by a person and not on a steady tripod. If you're looking at the video, you'll see that the camera just moves around a little bit. And to get that effect, I set these, the amplitude and the frequency gain to these values. If you bump them up, you get real shaky horror camera, Blair Witch style stuff. And if you don't want that, if you don't want your camera to move around a bit, you just don't add noise to it. Now onto the videos, how to get the videos that you recorded before into Unity. And this is again a bit of a thing that I had to figure out, because there's a bunch of settings that you need to set up correctly. So for all these videos, as you can see, keep alpha is on, which is off by default. So what you want to do is click transcode if that's not ticked on, then click keep alpha, then hit apply and wait for a couple of minutes. It takes a while, and that will allow you to use the alpha channel in your videos. So that's not just a black background or a black square around your video element. Now another thing before we get these videos in here is we need to create a video element or video material to render to, because how Unity works is you apply a material to a 3D plane, like it's basically a flat square in 3D, and then the material, it just updates the texture basically of that plane with how many FPS you have it set to. Let's just go over here. Which one was it again? Video material 2. The one I used was the HDRP lit shader. This one. And the things that I changed was alpha clipping threshold to 0.5. And then I think metallic and smoothness was set somewhere around here. I just changed it to 0. because if you set it higher, it reflects light, like it's metallic, and smoothness kind of explains itself. It'll reflect light and make it look metallic. Again, if you want that, put that value somewhere where it looks good for you. But I just wanted the video elements to show up as I recorded them, and that's why I set it to 0 and 0. Then, let me just enable this renderer. That's how it'll look inside your scene. It's just a white square. On that white square, you'll add the video material, and then you just simply drag the video onto the plane, which will show up as a video player. Now I set all these videos to play on awake, which means once they get enabled, they start playing immediately. And because we cut all the videos to be the exact same length and start at the same time, what I did was I put all those planes, all those video planes and cameras under one empty game object, the shots holder, which is disabled at start because we have a little shot in the beginning of the video where no videos are playing. And then when this gets enabled, all the videos start playing immediately and they all sync up. So let me just go back to that front plane. The other thing I have changed that is on by default is the skip on drop. Now this says that it'll allow the video to catch up if it somehow falls behind. But what I found was, maybe it's just because I'm using the render output or the video renderer element in Unity, that it messes up a bit. But when I had this on, it would mess up the timing of the video elements. So that's something I had to turn off. So if you're having issues with your videos getting out of sync, just disable this on every video, which you can do in batch, like most things in Unity. If you select multiple things with the same element on it, you can disable and enable things in batch. And then the final thing to get it to work is you need to select material override. Then I think it automatically selects the current thing it's on. Select the material override to base color map. And we didn't have any audio in the videos to begin with, but you might want to consider not recording the audio output from the videos, especially if you're cutting around, because it'll probably create weird effects. Basically, it'll enable positional audio in the engine, which can be a bit disorienting in the video. And besides that, we're going to add video in the timeline itself anyway, so that it'll just be one video track or one audio track playing, which just makes it a bit more easier to manage. Let me just quickly disable this thing here and show you what we have running up until now. So if I press the play button, you'll see everything enabling at once. There, that's what you'll see when we just have the video elements running in there and the 3D models in there. As you can see, it's a video in 3D space, and you know, if you look at it from the back or from the side, it'll just appear, which is another, you know, thing you'll have to deal with in Unity, which means if you have a, let's see, which one is this? This is the right angle. Just disable this one. For instance, if we go to the hard on right angle, you'll see that here's the light coming from. The light is not hitting anything or barely anything because it's literally a zero width plane in 3D space. So from this angle, there's no shadows being projected. I'm sure there's some way to fix this to get it to work, but I didn't look too far into that. I just, you know, took it as it is. Some angles don't have shadows. That's just how it is in this one. Backing out. Let me just play this one again. And one thing you'll probably notice when you set this stuff up is that it probably won't line up correctly. The shots aren't lined up correctly, or somebody's floating above the ground or in the ground, or is scaled up way too big, and you want to change that. Because of the way Unity works is you can play the videos in edit mode, so you have to hit play mode to actually see what's going on. But then when you move something around, like, oh, I want them over here, this plane is now set up over there, but when I back out and enable the renderer so you can see, it's back here. So what you need to do is you need to edit things one element at a time. You can edit them again. You're going to edit them here. You're going to set them up correctly here and a bit here, and scale them up a bit. And then before you exit play mode, you're going to go to transform, copy component, and if you look at this element here, when I back out, it'll jump back again. But because we hit copy component, we can paste these component values there. Now it's the same as we exited play mode. Just go back here. And you'll need to do that for every element, and that's a bit of a pain to do. Of course, for the 3D elements, you can see them, so you can set them up in edit mode without having to do all that. But the video elements, that's something you need to do one by one. And luckily, once you have that done, you never have to touch it again. But you know, that's like for these, how many shots are there? I think there are 5 different shots. So 10 planes. Just hit play, move them, copy paste, do that 10 times. The final thing you shouldn't forget is to rotate the planes so that the rotation lines up with the camera. You want to look at the planes dead on, because else you'll get some weird foreshortening and perspective issues. Now here's something else that I ran into. As you saw just now, the videos were playing nicely. They didn't clip into each other or whatever. But when you set it up, you'll have something else showing. I'll just disable a script on a couple of these. Go into these and enable the renderer. This is what you'll see when you're setting it up. And that's all the videos playing at the same time over each other, which, you know, obviously isn't what you want. And there's another thing in Unity that you kind of have to work around with. The videos, they start to play when they're enabled, but when you disable them, they'll stop. And when you then enable them again, they'll start from the first frame again. And that's not something you want to have happen when you're cutting around. So what I did is I created a little script. Just open it up. And what the script does is it just disables and enables the renderer on the plane. And what the renderer does, it's what draws the video onto the actual plane. And when you disable that, the video will still be running in the background, but it just won't be rendered. So this script is attached to the camera. When that camera is enabled, it'll go through each mesh render that I have set up in the scene that's linked to this specific instance of the script, and it'll turn the renderer on. Then when the camera gets disabled, it'll just turn on those renderers off, so that it'll just automatically set up the right videos depending on what camera is active at that moment. So as you can see, when I go back into play mode again, there, the videos play, but when I disable this camera that's linked to it, they disappear. Enable, they are rendered again, disabled, enabled, but you know, when you have 2 cameras enabled, they'll obviously still play on top of each other, but that's just something we'll have to cut around. Just make sure that you only have 1 camera enabled at a time. But that's something we'll go over in a bit when we are setting up the animation and sequencing of all the shots. And the final thing we can do before we go into the animation and sequencing of the shots is show some of the post-processing that I have on this thing. As you can see, enabling, disabling it changes a bunch, like it gives it a different filter, a whole lot of stuff is going on. Let me just go into this one, the global volume, which again, add component, volume. There you can see, you'll have to add that, and then you get all this, well, not this, not all this, you have to add all these things yourself. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff you can add, different types of shadows, different sky types, lightning stuff, post-processing stuff. There's all stuff you can add and mess around with. Now, a couple of the things I found were most useful was ambient occlusion, which, as you can see, gives shadows to places where things are touching or almost touching, and just grounds everything a bit more. Lots of stuff you can mess with. I think, as you can see here, I just mess with the intensity and up the quality a bit. You see, you can make it look however you want. And I think the same goes for everything here. Chromatic aberrations, if I'll just enlarge this one, you can see it just gives a bit of distortion, bit of blur, bit of, I thought it looked cool, so I added it. Now the HDR sky is, if I disable this, you'll see it'll change the colors a bit, and that's because of the HDR of the HD render pipeline. It takes into account the color of the sky. So, enabling and disabling this, you can see this thing is pretty orange. I think it's a fireplace at sunset. And this is again something I downloaded off the internet. I didn't make it myself. This is from HDRI Haven. Something you can download for free again. Import it into your project, drag it in here. Just gives it a bit of extra, and especially if you have an outside scene, adding a nice skybox, a nice HDRI sky can change a lot. Obviously, you don't want a picture of a house when you're doing an outside shot, but or maybe you do. I don't know. You do you, whatever. Exposure just changes the exposure of the digital camera. And one thing I did find was that I didn't want to have it set to automatic because of the way I cut around. When I set it to automatic, in combination with the cut style of the video, where it just goes, when it cuts to a different angle and not smoothly lerps the camera around, it'll give it a white flash, and then the exposure adjusts. So just set it to fixed and set it to a value that you like. Screen space reflection, I don't think it actually does that much in the final project because I also had a reflection probe set up in the scene. But screen space reflection allows reflective surfaces to accurately reflect whatever's going on in the scene. So if you have a mirror or shiny surfaces in there, add this in here and it'll reflect it'll reflect correctly. And I think the rest just adds a couple of more tweaks. Screen space, global illumination does, I think it's kind of like, almost like ray tracing, but not really. Kind of like, I don't know, a bit like fake ray tracing. Well, it just calculates the light bounces around. In here, the locker that it's in is a bit reflective, so it reflects light on stuff. It just adds a bit more realism to it. Finally, the fog that's in here is done with a density volume and fog effect, which basically could have been done on the global volume, but this is just how I ended up setting it up. And this gives that God ray effect you can see here. And when things are moving around in there, that effect will be amplified a bit. You can see it, you can always see it from every angle, but from the angles you can see it on. I think it looks pretty cool. And again, this is something you can tweak endlessly. I just set it up how I thought it looked cool and left it at that. Final little details is the dust floating around is just something from the HD render pipeline example scene. It has a couple of dust particles or stuff that you can add, like butterflies, but I just use the floating dust one. And one last thing, decal projectors. Let me just go to this one. This basically allows you to put, I use it for stickers, but you can use any, you can add in any detail to any surface. You just need to set up the HDRP decal, which takes a texture, and I add a little normal map for a little sticker reflectiveness. But if you just set up a color map, a texture, it'll work fine too. So now we finally have our entire scene set up and all the videos play when they're in shot. But now it's time to actually create the video itself. And for that, what you need is an empty game object with the playable director object on it. Because what this allows you to do is, let me just open up the timeline, which is under sequencing timeline. And as you can see here, this is the timeline for the entire video, which looks a bit cluttered right now, but it'll make sense once I go through everything. So empty game object, playable director. If it doesn't have a playable on it, a timeline, might as well just create a new one and just go through the process. Create empty, new director to this empty game object, and the playable director. And as you can see, when you have a timeline selected with a playable director and there's no timeline actually created, just create a new one, new test playable. And there you'll have your timeline then. Now, a couple of the things I set up here is I set it to DSP clock. Again, this is something that I found out works best for this type of video. If I left it on this, there were some desyncing issues again. So DSP clock prevents that. So once you have this open, if you don't see it, again, window, sequencing timeline, it'll show up. Then I'll just lock this one, because whenever you click off this director, it will show that the current object doesn't have a timeline. I showed you. There, that's what you get when you click around. So this, lock it so that it doesn't disappear. And then, first thing I did here was just drag the song on there. And what this does, it'll play the song when we go into play mode. It'll play the song. It'll display the song as a 2D sound source, so that it's so you can actually sequence your shots to that song. Let me just mute this song so that we don't hear the first 5 seconds of it every time. And the main thing you're going to be doing in this timeline is just enabling and disabling cameras. So the first thing I want to do is disable this one, because as I said before, this is the parent to all the videos. So when this one gets activated, it activates all the videos and they all start playing. And to get that working in the timeline, you simply drag that object over here and add an activation timeline. Now, when the timeline gets to that part, it'll activate, as you can see here, it'll preview it. It'll activate that parent object. And when it's not on there, it'll deactivate it again. So, because these videos are all synced, they will be playing through the entire video, you want your thing to just be stretching across the entire video. And let me just check if I don't have any cameras enabled by mistake. No, so when I press play, you'll see that nothing happens. I muted the video track and no cameras are enabled. So I'll just do nothing. So to get those cameras to show up, we simply drag them in and wait for this all to, drag them in, add an activation track. As you can see, it starts previewing the game window already. And set up those shots. So that's the camera on one side. Let me add another camera, add an activation one again. And because of the script we have set up, we want to line it up so that it's only one active at the time. And luckily it snaps automatically when you come, when you cross the end of one with another one. Do that there. And then just have a final camera set up here. Add an activation track again. Get it over here. Now let's just check how that looks, if it does what we want it to do. There it goes from one camera to the other camera, and it works fine. Now the one thing you can do with the timeline is that's something you can edit in play mode. So you can just move these shots around any way you want. And another activation clip here. And it just works. It just works. And when no cameras are active, it goes to the front camera, the only thing that's active by default here. And because there's no script set up that's linked to a plane with a video on it, no videos are played. So if we go out of that, you'll see that it'll retain those edits we made. So that's very useful to do, or that's a very useful feature. So the first thing you want to do is just set up all these shots, drag in each camera, each different camera, so 4 to 5 left. The front facing camera, we want an activation track in there, and we want the right camera to be in there. And from there, you just want to cut up all the shots in your video, just to have the basic shots in there. And activation clip. Zoom in a bit. Line them up. And just go through your entire video, adding those shots. Go through the entire video, then go into play mode and see how it looks. And then just edit shots if they don't feel right or if they look weird. Make the edits in play mode. Go through that entire thing until the entire video is shot. Now in our video, there's also bits where the camera moves around a bit, where it pans around just a bit, or it zooms in or zooms out on certain elements. And that's the kind of the next step you're gonna do here is, again, you're gonna drag in, let's see, our camera for 45. We drag that in here, and instead of adding an activation clip, we add an animation track. And just move that up here under the actual camera. And what the animation clip allows you to do is create animations. So what we're gonna do here is go to the first frame of that shot. Let's see, we can go frame by frame. Zoom in. There. Go to the first shot, click start recording, and then go to this thing. And what I did here is just Control X, Control V, which just creates a keyframe there on that position in that point in time. And this is how I did it for all the clips. I just made a keyframe just in front of it, just to kind of save that position in a keyframe, because you just set up all the cameras correctly. You don't want to lose that. Then I go to the end of whatever, how long I want my animation to be. And because I had this thing open now, I did it by double clicking this. We can add a keyframe again. And as you can see, it added a keyframe on the end of that section. And how I did it, I wanted the camera to end up in a position that I had it set up before. So it starts somewhere else and it goes through there. And that's just how I found worked best, because then when I have another clip after that in the same angle, it'll be on the right position. But in this activation clip, I wanted to move around a bit. So because we have the keyframe one frame before the activation of the actual clip, we can set the first frame of the actual activation clip when it's actually active. Go into the scene, go to that camera, press F to focus on the camera, and apparently it wants me to zoom out. Then we can move that camera anywhere we want. And then when we go back into the timeline and preview that, you can see it moves around smoothly. It just goes from one keyframe to the other in a smooth way. And by adding those keyframes, going from one position to the next, you can add a bit of more interesting shots in there. And that's especially cool because the videos are rendered in a position in 3D space. So they'll pass back and forth, they'll pass over each other in a realistic way. Now there's a whole lot of other stuff you can do with this. When you have this set to record, and as you can see here, it jumps a bit. So what you want to do there when you see that is zoom in and just move these keyframes back a bit. I think, yeah. Yeah, so you kind of want to tweak this, because what we had before was the keyframe of the initial position, and then the next frame it jumps to the start position. This is something we want to have show up in the video. So I just want to move those keyframes a bit so that once it starts activated, it's moving like we want it and not jumping around. So you can do that with any value in that object. As you can see here, the red ones, that's what we're moving around. But we could also, for instance, change the focal length. Let me just Ctrl X, Ctrl V, which again adds a keyframe. Then maybe the next, we wanted to zoom in over a couple of seconds. Go to 30. And then for that final frame, I want to add a keyframe again. Just punch in the same number there, which will create a keyframe. I just add another keyframe there for the focal length so that it doesn't mess up the animation. Then gotta remember that before activating that new clip, just give it a keyframe that goes back to the original value. And like if I didn't add this keyframe here at the end, it'll go through, it'll zoom in and then start zooming back out very, very slowly, because before the next activation we wanted to have it go back to normal. So you can see here, it moves and it zooms in and then it continues moving And then by the time we get to this one, it's static again because they haven't added any keyframes in there. But you can do this with any value that's in here, and not all of them are useful to add keyframes to. For instance, a priority, there's no reason to animate the priority of the camera, but maybe you want to have it scale up in how wild the handheld movements are, so you can keyframe this value somewhere. Maybe you want to rotate it, so you're gonna keyframe this value. Let's not do that, but you could. And that's how I went through the entire video. I played it again after all the keyframes, or after all the shots were set up, and when something was again too boring, or I just felt like the shot could use a bit more, I animated something. I moved the camera up or down, or I zoomed it in or zoomed it out. It just adds a bit of extra visual interest to the video. Now let's say you have your entire video set up. Let me just deactivate this and go back to the actual final video director that I used for this video. This new director can be disabled. Go to this one, unlock and lock again. And now we're on the video director that I used for this video. And I hope this view makes more sense now with the activation clips and the keyframes. Up here we have the song, but the one thing that's new here is the recorder track, which is the thing that enables us to output something onto our computer. And if you're not seeing the recorder track, if you want to add one yourself, you add one by going to this plus up here. Unity add a recorder timeline, recorder track, and that will add one of these on here. Now the recorder clip, right click, and recorder clip. And from there, there's a couple of settings that you want to change. As you can see here, the playback and target frame rate is not something you can change in here, but it is important. And to do that, you go to the video director, go to the playable timeline asset, and in here you want to set the frame rate to the same frame rate as your video elements are, because again, that's something, if that mismatches, you'll have playback issues. So our video elements are all in 24 frames per second, so this one needs to be on 24 frames per second too. Then we go back here, and recorder type, movie speaks for itself, but the other one that's useful is the animation or the image sequence. And if you select that one, it'll output each and every frame individually, which is useful if you want to create something like what I did, a Spotify header. I created a different camera, a different playable director, but I then used the image sequence, made this 1 frame long, and then just rendered out 1 frame of the video to use as a Spotify banner. But let's not do that this time. Let's just go back to movie. The source, game view, that's what we've been setting up this entire time. If you just have one single camera, targeted camera works, but game view, it'll just render everything that we set up here, including the cuts and the pans and all that stuff. Output resolution, I chose just full HD 1080p, but if you want to render higher, then sure, that's your choice. But because our videos weren't bigger than 1080p anyway, it'll just mean we saw more of the pixels in there, and that's not something that really makes the video any better. Include audio is useful to have on, but for editing later, because the one thing you need to do in editing software is replace the main audio track, the music track in your video, because the recorder clip just destroys audio quality. It's very unfortunate, but that's the one thing you need to change once you have it rendered. you need to bring it into any video editing software, replace the music track, which will be very simple because you can just see the audio clip. Replace that and render it out again. Media format, MP4. Not much else to say about that. Set the quality to high. And this is pretty handy. The file name takes some wildcards. So you can say this is the Unity render. And then have it take the wildcard of take, which set up here, the take number, which increments, I think it says so. It increments by 1 after each recording. So it's way easier to render out a couple of different takes, render something out, change a shot or two here, render it out again, and it'll create a new file with a different number on the end. And with that set up, we're basically ready to go to render our video. Now, the one thing that is useful to remember here, or useful to do, is when you press play, the first frame will be a bit messed up. It'll load in, it'll take a frame to load in some things, or to load the light map or the actual video data. So what I do whenever I want to render out a new video, let me just see if everything is enabled as I want it to. Yeah. First press pause, then press play. Wait for everything to load. You'll see it pop up there. As you saw, that frame that it hang on first, if you don't press pause first, that frame will be rendered into your video. And this is something you want. But then after we unpause, it'll start running through it, and it takes about the same length as your video is to render. And you can see it actually playing in here. It just takes the output of this frame as the video to it, or the audio to it, and it'll render it to the place wherever you have it set up. So for me, that's summer break, recordings, Unity renderer. So let me just go to that. As you can see, it's being created here. And if I just stop this, you can see here, I stopped it after 1 minute. Let me just open up this video, and you can see that it's the video with the audio under it, which Unity crunches up quite a bit. But then you just take this video, import it in whatever video editor you're using, replace the audio, and render it out again, and that's your music video. Then you have a music video made in Unity. Now, you won't get any pop-ups or messages once the video is done. It'll just continue on until the end, and when it's done, it'll go back to frame 0, or it'll hang on the last frame. You won't get any pop-ups, but once you see this playhead on the end not moving anymore, you know it's safe to exit play mode, and your video will be rendered perfectly. Now, a final couple of things that you want to check if you're having again playback issues with videos. It's a thing that a lot of things cause it, but you know, there's a couple of fixes for everything. So when you go to project settings, in the quality header, you want to make sure that VSync is set to every VBlank. That again fixes some syncing issues in your video. If you're having syncing issues, that's another thing you can check. But that's everything you need to know. That's how you make a music video in Unity. If you've made a music video using Unity or any other video, I would love to know it. Leave your links in the comments or add me on Twitter, because I'd love to see more videos done in Unity. And with that, thanks for watching and good luck with your videos.